Sundar, I cordially welcome you to this lecture in memory of our father, where we celebrate not only the life of our dad, Mr. Ravi Sondhi, but through his life celebrate the city that we so dearly love, the city that he loved and was also exasperated by. We're really thrilled that we have this lecture for the second edition at the Kothari Hall, which is a heritage venue set up in 1932 by Sir Jahangir Kothari in the memory of his wife. And I'm delighted that Mr. Singh is here, who spoke at the first lecture last year. Thank you for being here, sir. Dad had multiple personalities through the institutions that he set up in Bangalore. 3 Aces that Ramji wrote a brilliant piece on just yesterday. And that was before my time, and then later Hat-Trick Sports that I'm sure many of you have sort of bought your first cricket bat or carom board in. So, and your spikes, your first spikes, Prem, absolutely, the sprinter. And in a way, my sister saw the side of Dad with 3 Aces, which explains her wild side. She parties 4 nights a week. And I saw the sober Hat-Trick Sports side, which is why I'm languishing in bookstores. But there's one other institution that Ram overlaps with, which is Friends Union Cricket Club. And clearly you can tell from the applause, there are many Friends Union members here. Uncle Dore is here, who's also Ram's uncle. And Ram was not quite the Ravi Chandra Ashwin of Friends Union, but he did roll his arm over. But I know how passionately he feels about the club and about club cricket in Bangalore in general. And therefore, it is a double delight to have Ram with us today to speak in memory of my father today. Sujata, welcome. Ram, like Dad, also sort of adopted Bangalore as his city. Dad was a partition migrant, moved here when he was in his 20s. Ram grew up early in Dehradun. He went to Doon school, so -2 points for that. That's not to take away from Doon, but we Bangaloreans think we're only Bangaloreans if you went to school in Bangalore. But Ram will very quickly now prove to us how he's more blue-blooded than any of us. And I think it's been fitting that it's been over a chance encounter at Cubbon Park and then a couple of meetings in Koshis that we've ideated for today's lecture with this, what I think is a delightful topic, the booksellers of Bangalore. I think a great way to approach any new city is through its bookstores. And I had that great privilege over the last few months, Dallas, Bristol. It's a good thing to end up in a city cold, just find a good bookstore, go there and then fan out. And I think Bangalore there has really got something going to its credit. Church Street itself has in and around it 7 bookstores. And that can be a quick quiz question. If you think I'm fibbing it, we'll run over the list later. But 7 bookstores, some of whose owners we see here. Mr. Gowda is here from Bookworm. I don't know if I'm missing anyone else, but welcome to all the booksellers and book lovers of Bangalore. And indeed, this fantastic cross-section of Bangalore that we see, friends of my dad, friends of the family, and also people who probably just don't know me or my sister or my dad, but are here just because they know Ram, they love Bangalore, they love the book culture of Bangalore. Ram needs no introduction. He's a Padma Bhushan, he's a Sahitya Academy winner, but most of all, I think he's a city historian at heart, a cricket historian. And that's where we're looking forward to your thoughts, Ram, today on Bangalore and its booksellers. Obviously, I cannot close without mentioning Mr. Shanbag of Premier. Now, every time you sort of go on Amazon, I confess I do that sometimes. You go on Amazon and you pick a book and you suddenly will find 7 or 8 suggested for you, right? And this is what Mr. Shanbag used to do pre-Amazon. He was intuitive. And if you picked a book, he somehow just knew, I don't know how, he knew what you were looking for. And even if you didn't know you were looking for it, he would find a way to sort of persuade you to broaden your spectrum. And we've done a little postcard in his memory, which is lying. We'll pass copies around for each of you to take home as a memory of today's lecture. Ram will speak for about 40 or 45 minutes, and after that we will have about 20 minutes or so for an interaction and some questions that you may have. I hope friends who are fasting at Ramzan have been able to break their fast today. May I thank you once again, friends, for being here, and it is my very proud privilege to invite on stage Ramchandra Guha.
Well, Aditya didn't mention one of my qualifications for giving this second lecture in the series. I knew Ravi Sondhi longer than Aditya did. So I probably first met him in the early 70s. My clear memories are of the summer of 1974, when in those days you had a 6-month gap between school and college, and I spent it trying to become Ravi Chandra, Erapalli Prasanna, I beg your pardon, a far greater off-spinner than Ravi Chandra Ashwin. And I say this not just as a partisan of Karnataka. So I spent that summer watching Prasanna bowl, getting Bombay out and us winning the Ranji Trophy, and trying to bowl like Prasanna in the nets. And that was the year 1974, when my uncle Dore got a promotion, which surprised everyone in the family. And it obliged him to move to Chennai, then Madras. So he, the Friends Union Cricket Club, which he had run since 1963, had to be handed over to other hands, and that's where Ravi Sondhi came in. Ravi and Dore had met in Delhi many years ago. I don't know in what context. So I knew Ravi from 1974, which is, I think, several years before Aditya was born. And one of our links was, indeed, the Friends Union Cricket Club. Now, I should say a little bit about one word in my talk. My talk is entitled The Booksellers of Bangalore, not Bengaluru. And that's not because I oppose the use of the word Bengaluru. You know, I am a liberal, a pluralist, so I'm happy for people to say Bangalore or Bengaluru, Mumbai or Bombay, Delhi or Delhi. But there is a kind of a subtle cultural distinction between Bangalore and Bengaluru. Bangalore is a cantonment, and Bangalore is largely English-speaking people. So I'm not going to speak about the wonderful Kannada bookstores of Bengaluru, which hopefully a later lecturer in this series will speak about. So my life has been defined by libraries, archives, and books from when I was early on. It was cricket and it was books. And my dreams growing up were about cricket or books, and sometimes cricket and books. And one of the most vivid dreams I had over and over again had to do with Neville Cardus' autobiography. Neville Cardus, for those of you who are cricket lovers, but much younger than me and even Aditya, was the Gideon Haigh of his generation. He was the greatest cricket writer of his time, and I had read several of his books, but not his autobiography. I'd seen a copy. So there was a copy of Cardus' autobiography in the home of my uncle in Delhi, in the bedroom of my cousin, who was much older than me, had been to Doon School before me, had also been to Oxford. So he was very distant, and I was not, because he was older, he had been to Oxford, I was not allowed to enter his room. And at once I went there by accident, and I saw Cardus' autobiography. But then my aunt said, "You can't enter Chiki Anna's room, get out." So that was kind of a forbidden fruit for me, and I would have this dream right into my 30s, by which time I had collected many cricket books from all over the world, of being in a railway junction, possibly Bhusawal, and having 4 hours to catch a train. And coming out of the station, this vivid dream I have over and over again. I would come out of the station, I had 4 hours. I would ask someone, where is the nearest bookshop? I would be taken to a bookshop, and there would be a gorgeous second-hand bookshop with, hardbound books, some elegant, with elegant covers, gold and lettered golden covers, so you couldn't see the title. And I would go up. I remember this dream. There was on the top shelf. I picked out a book, and it said Cardas's autobiography, first edition. I brought it down. I went to the bookseller, and I said, very casually, as if it was, a Mills and Boon, "Kitne ka hai?" And he said, ₹10, 10 rupees. And I went to my wallet, took out the 10 rupees, and you know what happened? I got up. And I would have this dream over and over again. So that was my life. Books which I could get and books which I could not get. And I'll come in a bit to the booksellers of our city. But let me start with the other bookstores I knew. So in my hometown, Dehradun, there was the Nataraj bookstore, now called the Green Bookstore, wonderful bookstore. And Upendra Arora, who used to run it, I had Mr. Upendra Arora's father used to run it when I was young, stocked a variety of books. It's incidentally Ruskin Bond's favorite bookstore. But don't say that to the booksellers of Mussoorie. And I remember going there as a young boy, and this would be 1971, 70 or 71, and seeing a copy of Dennis Compton's End of an Innings, his autobiography. And I asked the bookseller how much, and he said 8 rupees or 10 rupees. And it's a true story, it's not a dream. And I went back home, and I came a few days later, and I asked my father for the 10 rupees which was given to me. And in those 3 days between my first buying the book and going to buy it, the rupee had been devalued by 200% against the pound. So what was now 10 rupees was 25. So that is the Nataraj bookseller in Dehradun. Then I go to Delhi to college, where how many people are there in this room who are over 55 and lived in or studied in Delhi? You don't have to tell me exactly how much over 55 you are. All right. Now, so you will remember, this is actually for you, Radha. You will remember the store Bookworm in Connaught Place and Mr. Arora playing jazz? Of course, right. So, in a wonderful store in Connaught Place with the owner playing jazz, no less. And that's where I had started reading fiction. That's where I bought my Hemingways and my Moms and my Orwells from the money I earned winning quizzes. So that was one part of life in Delhi, going to Mr. Arora and in Bookworm with always jazz playing in the background. Incidentally, he was a qualified chartered accountant who sensibly gave up a dreary and dull profession to sell books and listen to jazz. So that was one part of it. And the other part was on Sunday going to Daryaganj, to the Sunday Book Bazaar in Daryaganj and buying books there. And quite a few of my books, particularly the first editions, which I still possess, were bought in Daryaganj. And my son actually now goes there almost as often as I did when I was young. And there was also a very interesting, I think, shed, is all you can call it, outside the Plaza Cinema, where you would get second-hand books. Let me come then to my favorite Indian city, Bombay. So Bangalore is not my favorite city. Bombay is without question my favorite Indian city. Thank you. Among the stores I loved there was a new and second-hand bookstore in Kalbadevi. Anyone here remembers it? You're too young. Yes, okay. But Zach remembers it. So do you, sir. So this was a wonderful store, which is now defunct, where you get all kinds of books. And I once went there. This was when I was in my 30s. I had more money. I saw many books, including a copy of the first English biography of Mahatma Gandhi by the priest Joseph Doak. So a large pile of books, and I have a back problem, so I couldn't carry them back by train. I told him, will you post them? And in those days, of course, the postal service was impeccably reliable. And the books came. So this was 91, 92. I was staying in Delhi, and the books came from the new and second-hand bookstore in Kalbadevi, and I opened them one and one. That's what you do, when you order books, even on Amazon. Even on Amazon, when a packet comes with your name, you're really excited to say, iske andar kya hai? Kaun si kitab hai? What is the condition it is in? And even if you picked it up, as I had in this case, 2 weeks earlier in the store, now it's come. And I opened them, and I came to Dokes Gandhi. And then I noticed, as I saw the flyleaf, I noticed something I had not seen in the store. It was signed Gopal Krishna Gandhi, May 1957. Now, I am not a novelist, so this is true. So I saw this, I kind of vaguely recognized the handwriting, which was not dissimilar so this is like 35 years later, Gopal was then in his late 40s, as I had seen it then. So I went over to Gopal Gandhi's house, and I said, Gopal, is this yours? So he looked at it, and he said, the handwriting looks mine. I said, were you in Bombay in May 1957, because that was the date given? He said, I think so, because my father was unwell and we had gone to consult the doctor. So I said, Gopal, in that case, it is yours. So he said, wait a minute, you just sit here. So I sat in his living room. He went inside to his study, brought out a beautiful first edition of Doke, laminated by the National Archives of India, with, on the flyleaf, something written by Gandhi's youngest son, Gopal's father, Devdas Gandhi, to the effect, this is the first and finest biography of Bapu. So Gopal said, I have the copy I want, you can keep this. So that's the kind of discovery you would make in the new and second-hand bookstores. Then you have, of course, the pavement stalls in Flora Fountain, now sadly depleted. Once upon a time, they went all round Churchgate. Now there are about 5 or 6. But you can get all kinds of interesting books there. I remember once getting a first edition of the first book Dom Moraes ever wrote. Now, I don't want to quiz you, but I'm sure none of you know which is the first book Dom Moraes published. It was not, no, you're a poet and you got it wrong, you get it wrong. No, and it was not even his poetry. It was not his poetry, it was not his autobiography, it was a cricket book called Green is the Grass, published when he was 13, based on his reports in the Times of India. And I remember getting it back to Bangalore, and 2 or 3 weekends later, reading an interview with Dom Moraes saying, I don't have a copy of my first book. And I said, man, I'm not going to send this to you. Right. So that's the kind of experiences I've had in cities other than Bangalore. So before I come to our hometown and the booksellers here, let me at least give a nod to great bookstores in other countries. Once I became older and would get invitations to travel abroad, I discovered some fabulous bookstores, and I'm listing them. I'm not telling you about my finds, but I'm listing them for the benefit of those of you who travel and have not yet discovered these bookstores. I'm going to mention 4. 4 in 4 cities in 4 continents. John Sandoe in London, off the King's Road. Elliot's Bay in Seattle, near the Bay. Clark's in Cape Town, the greatest bookstore in Africa. And the Berkalow Book Barn in Sydney. 4 stores that have given me immense pleasure and which I have raided on 1, 2, 3 trips I have made them. But of course, my favorite bookstores are in some cases were in my own city, Bangalore. Now, I mentioned this dream about Cardus's autobiography and my never finding the book. The closest I came to fulfilling this dream was in Select Bookstore. Now, just as I knew Ravi Sondhi longer than Aditya did, I have been a patron of Select Bookstore before KKS Murthy joined it. And I think that puts me in a very small category in this room. How many people here knew KBK Rao before Murthy? Okay, that's 1. And I think Sudhata also possibly. That's 2. Now, Mr. Rao started the store. 3, thank you. So, Mr. Rao started the store in the 1930s. And one of the advantages I have over Aditya is that I was a friend of his father's. And one of the reasons he pays me some deference. And Mr. Murthy, though he is much older than me, knows that I was a patron of his father's store before he took it over. So if he says this is 500 rupees, I can tell him your father would have charged me 50 rupees. And I have known Select in many locations. So first in Church Street, in an old bungalow which is now the Pollution Control Office, then in Malleshwaram, then in MG Road where Thomas Cook used to have occupy an old building, and now finally in Brigade Road. And I can't remember in which of these locations, but it was after Mr. Rao gave his store over to Mr. Murthy, who actually gave up a green card. He's an aeronautical engineer, gave up his green card to come and take over his father's store. I came closest to finding something akin to Neville Cardis's autobiography. So I was again looking for rare things. And of course, as a historian, you're looking for old pamphlets and old books, first editions, out-of-print books from the late 19th or the early 20th centuries. And these books are often, as I said, if they were valued by their original owner, they have a very elegant kind of cloth or silk binding. So I was looking around, and somewhere in a pile I found this fabulous pamphlet about that big, beautifully bound. And I opened it. And all except the first page of that pamphlet was in Tamil, which is technically my mother tongue, but I do not read it. And which was a source of eternal sorrow to my granduncle, who was a great Tamil scholar, whose postcards to me would end, learn Tamil and lead a simple life, and I lamentably failed him in both respects. So here was a kind of a thing in Tamil, but the numerals were in English, so I could tell it was a Tamil calendar. And on the last page, there were a few lines in English which said, they were handwritten, and they said, "This is the horoscope of my granddaughter Janaki, cast on her birth on 22nd March 1910. Now I looked at it. My grandmother was called Janaki. She was born on the 22nd of March 1910. And she was in her late 70s, early 80s. Several people in this room actually knew my lovely grandmother, Janaki Narayan Murthy, who used to live in Jai Mahal. So I went to her and said, "Pati, is this your horoscope?" So she looked at it, just like Gopal, forgetting that he had a book from 1957 because his father was ill and the house had been disposed of. My Pati looked at it and said, "This is my father's handwriting. And I think, when your grandfather died, some books were sold and this must have gone with it." So this is the discovery I made in Select Bookstore. My grandmother's horoscope. Right, now, but of course, I valued Select much more for the materials I got there for my research. We live in a city, I beg your pardon. We live in a city which calls itself the knowledge capital, would you believe it, of India, and it does not have a single decent library. And writing the books I have, which depend a lot on, out-of-print documents, books, pamphlets, collected works of Nehru, Gandhi, etc. Without Select, I don't know how I would have written many of these books. Of course, I've had to make innumerable trips to libraries and archives outside our city, but always with Select as a backup. And with no access to a decent library in Bangalore, Mr. Rao, and then after him Mr. Murthy, their assistance and advice and help proved critical. And Select has very often figured in the acknowledgements to my books. Finally, with great pleasure, I was able to smuggle Select into the text of one of my books. This is the last book I wrote, which is called Rebels Against the Raj, which is about 7 foreigners who joined the Indian freedom struggle. And one of them was a character called Philip Spratt, who started as a communist and ended as a member of Swatantra Party, and married a Tamil girl, settled in Bangalore in the 1940s, and would regularly patronize KBK Rao and Select Bookstore. So I was able, with due historical scrupulousness, to smuggle KBK Rao and the Select Bookstore in a historical narrative, not tucked away in a personal acknowledgement. So that is one of the greatly beloved booksellers of Bangalore, Select. And the other, of course, whom Aditya has mentioned, the other and even more beloved bookseller of Bangalore, the late Mr. T.S. Shanbag. of Premier. Now, Select gave me stuff for my research. Premier gave me stuff for my heart and my soul. This is where I bought the novels, the biographies, the memoirs that I read for pleasure rather than for information. And I was thinking about, while coming here and thinking about my talk, about when I first started going to Premier. I said that I spent a summer here in 1974 playing cricket. And I remember becoming a member of the British Library in that summer, borrowing books from there. I remember going to the Bangalore club, where my uncle Dore was a member, and one facility he had never used in the club was the bar, and the other was the library. But I used these cards to borrow books. But I don't really recall going to Premier in that summer of 1974 when I was 16. I discovered KBK Rao and Select in the summer of 76 or 77. Ironically, a teacher of mine in St. Stephen's told me, "You're going to Bangalore for the summer?" His name is Vijay Tankha. He was a legendary teacher of philosophy. And he told me, "You must go there." So I discovered Select in about 1976. And I don't believe I discovered Premier before 1979 properly, when I got to know Sujata. And she had, of course, known Premier from almost since it began, because she'd been in Bangalore from the early 70s as a little girl. And she would go with her mother and her sister. But I very clearly remember the first book I bought in Premier. And I hesitate to give you its name, and I shall explain why, but I shall give you the name nonetheless. It was Isaiah Berlin's biography of Karl Marx, which I bought in January 1980. Now, there's several senior advocates in this room, not just our host. And I don't know what the statute of limitations is. Whether buying, according to the new judgment of the Supreme Court, which came yesterday or day before, whether buying a biography of Karl Marx in 1980 makes me liable to arrest under UAPA. I can't say for sure. But that is the first book I bought. And were it to make me liable for arrest under UAPA, and if one of the wonderful advocates in this room was to defend me, I would give them my first line of defense. I would say, Isaiah Berlin, who wrote this book on Marx, was a liberal and a lifelong anti-communist. Anyway, that's the first book I remember buying from Premier, and of course, dozens and hundreds of books followed. Now, among the charms of Premier was the wild eccentricities of the layout. Now, again, where is dear Raghav Shreyas's card is here. Right, now this is part of it. Right, now if you remember it, you would enter. By the way, I have known Premier, like most of you, from Church Street, but he actually started a little earlier in Kasturba Road, and I'll come to that in a bit. But the Church Street store, you entered, and there he was, with a huge, he was sitting on the left with a huge pile of papers. Could be a little man, you could see his bald pate just kind of coming out. And then you go left, and then you would start, you would say, "Hello, Mr. Shanbag," and you would start navigating the store. So you would, first there would be the biographies, the hardbacks, then there would be the hardback novels, then I think was sociology, politics. Then in the middle was this vast mound of books, 8 or 10 or 12 layers deep, representing the discarded knowledge of Bangaloreans down the decades. And no, it was like no archaeologist had ever gone there and looked at, iske niche kya hai? What is behind this? So you would go and you would see, you would go, as I said, there was biography, history, new fiction, sociology. Then you would round the bend, you would come to children's literature. Then you would come to religion. And next to religion, appropriately, science. And then after that, you would have paperback fiction. Now, so it was a voyage of discovery, only interrupted if there was a newcomer in the store and he did not follow the unspoken rule, which is you always went clockwise. And suddenly, and you bump into a fellow, wow, he's coming the other way. I know all of you experience it in Bangalore roads every day, but it was not pleasant to experience it in Shahanbag's Premier bookstore. So that was one attraction, the eccentricity of the layout, the extraordinary charm of the man, which Aditya has mentioned. And Let me tell you one story about the kind of sly and wicked humor Shanbag had. He spoke very little, but he had a mischievous sense of humor, and I was once victim to it when I went to buy books, not for myself, but for a friend unfairly prosecuted for a crime he did not commit. It does not just happen in our country, it happens in other countries too. I'm speaking here of the world's richest democracy, and there's a close friend of mine who's been spent many years in jail for a crime he did not commit, and who's an extraordinarily learned man who loves reading books. And I would send him serious stuff, so I would send him sociology, politics, histories of finance. Every year or so I would send him books, and it was time to hear. Then he would read them and send me the most interesting and informed commentary on these books, of a kind which accomplished literary critics would find hard to match. So I had gone to buy books for my friend, which had to be posted. So what would happen is, they couldn't go for me, they had to go from a bookstore. So Shanbag would put his seal, and he knew that. He knew the kind of books I bought there. So on this trip, my friend had said, I want some good new books on Indian history. So I pulled out an elegant hardback of Sunil Khilani's Idea of India. This is in the year 2001 or 2. And I said, Mr. Shanbag, keep that in the packet. Then I went down a little bit. I said, do you have a hardback of the New Subaltern Studies, volume 7? He said, yes, that was there. I took it out. And as Aditya said, now he wanted to help me. He wanted to play a prehistoric Amazon. So he started picking out books for me, judging the train of my thought. And he picked out a book by a famous, celebrated Indian non-fiction writer whose work I find, non-fiction work I find, utterly boring. And he's not female, he's male. All right, I want to make that clear because it's relevant to the story I should now tell. So Mrs. Shanbag said, what about this? I said, oh, this fellow's rubbish. My friend, can't you see what else I've taken? I don't want this chap. And there were 10 or 12 people there, and he smiled and looked at me and said, wait a minute, Ram, we do not want more fights in the Hindu. And everyone broke out laughing because I'd just been engaged in a furious polemic with a female writer in the Hindu. And as it turned out, the person whose book I was rejecting also wrote for the Hindu. So he said, and I turned absolutely red, and everyone was laughing around me because they all got Shanbag's crack, He said, wait a minute, we don't want any more fights in the Hindu. So Shanbag was one end of Church Street. The other end of Church Street was Ravi Sondhi of Hattrick. Right? Two extraordinary gentlemen, one a Konkani from the coast, one a Punjabi from pre-partition Punjab. That was the spirit of Bangalore. Both represented this, each in their own distinctive way, in their courtesy, in their charm, in their professionalism, in their easy way with their customers, in the way in which they integrated themselves in the city, represented the spirit of Bangalore. Now, on one of my visits to Shanbag, I asked him, when did you start your store? So he reflected and said it was in, I think he said January 1971. I asked him this about 1999, and I kept it in my mind for a year and a half, and I told Sujata, we have to throw a party for his 30th birthday. So a party was organized at our home, in which quite a few people came, including some are here, but I was petrified that Shanbag would not attend, because he was a notoriously publicity shy man. So in those days, he would be open on Sunday till 12:30. And I said, Mr. Shanbag, I'll come at 12:30 and pick you up. So I was nervous, will he come? And the guests had all said yes. And Sujata had printed a beautiful card, not dissimilar to this card, a photograph of the madness of the store. I landed up at 10:45, and I said, I just stood next to his till. And I said, are you coming? He said, wait a minute, it's only 10:45, I close at 12. I said, can't you go close at 12 today? You come a little early. Finally, he gave up, and we had asked for his wife and daughter also to come. So he landed up, and there was this extraordinary party. It was one of these days in Bangalore, which recalled the famous statement of C.V. Raman. to the effect that his greatest discovery was the weather of Bangalore. So the gorgeous cloudless day, much less polluted in 2001 than it is now. And there was a party for Shanbagh, and there were some speeches made about Shanbagh. One was by Chiranjeev, who's sitting here, whom I barely knew then. And I, of course, you all know what a wonderful speaker Chiranjeev is, and his manner of delivery is, shall we say, different from mine. May I also say more refined than mine? May I further say more subtle than mine? So, more literary than mine, no more multilingual than mine, so I can go on and on and on. But I can't recall exactly what he said, but he talked about meeting Shanbagh. He said that I first knew Shanbagh when he had moved to Bangalore in 1970, and he was in Kasturba Road, opposite the Venkatappa Art Gallery, and Chiranjeev was then in the Chief Minister's office with two other book-loving colleagues, Christopher Lynn and the late P.K. Srinivasan. So three profoundly learned people in a Chief Minister's office in Karnataka. And moreover, a Sardar, a Thia from Malabar, and a Goan Catholic. That was the spirit of Bangalore. So I remember Chiranjeev talking about how he would go to Shanbagh and buy books for the secretariat. And he talked about his relationship, and then he said, at the end he said, I want to tell you something about Mr. Shanbagh. He is a bookseller. He is an Indian bookseller. And he has never entered a government office. I think all of you are born in the post-liberalization days, so you don't get what he's saying. Booksellers made a living selling books to the government, and possibly not a 30% cut, but something of that line. So Chiranjeev made one speech. There was also a speech by the late Tara Chandravarkar, Prem's mother, an extraordinary person, one of my all-time favorite Bangaloreans, who recalled, Tara lost her husband early, and then of course took over the architectural practice and made it an extraordinarily vibrant and successful practice till Prem then took it over. And she recalled, she said, in her talk she said, you know Shanbagh as a place for books of different kinds. You know it as a place for books for yourself, your parents and your children. But I also know it as a creche where I would leave my grandchildren when I went for client meetings. Right. Now, and that was the lovely party we threw for Shanbagh, but of course he had the last word. Before we left, he said, wait a minute. He went to his car and he brought out for each guest a gift from Premier. Now, he hadn't curated it because he didn't know whom we were calling. If I may just say one thing about that event. His wife and daughter came. And I remember Sujata telling me that, every day this quiet, small, silent man would leave the home, go to his office, come back home and have tiffin. And, I'm very likely Mr. Shanbagh had no clue what the hell he's doing. And here is this kind of whole of Bangalore kind of come there to kind of, welcome and applaud him. It's probably material for a play or a short story or some such. One last Shanbagh story. When Shanbagh shut in 2009, and he decided to retire because he had earned his retirement, and he did what very few successful, capable, well-acclaimed, reputable Indian men do. They retire. He retired. And he decided to retire, and Time Out, which then had a Bangalore edition, decided to organize a photo shoot for him with writers. So there were Kannada writers, there were Konkani writers, there were Tamil writers, there were English writers. And Anantamurthy was in the middle of the frame. And all of us were around him, and he asked in Kannada, he said, Girish Yellide, where is Girish? And I had to supply the explanation, Girish being Girish Karnad. I said, sir, Girish's daughter is getting married next week, so he sends his apologies. And I want to add that Girish's wife, Saras, says that our home has begun to resemble Premier Bookstore. You know, books on the landing, in the bed, or, you know, on the potty, in the shower. It's kind of resemble. And of course, everyone laughed, Shanbagh, louder than ever. So those were two stores I wanted to talk about. And briefly nod, if I may, to other bookstores I patronize in Bangalore. Vidya Virkarav Strand in Manipal Center, no longer around. Sudha Bookstore in Rajari Nagar, a very fine second-hand bookstore. Both are now gone. But still alive is the Nagashri Book House in Jayanagar. Now, how many people here have been to Nagashri in Jayanagar? Good. But there's still less than 1/3 of the room. So for the rest of you, it's got a more varied collection in some ways than any other bookstore now that Shanbagh is gone. So particularly if you want history, sociology, feminist studies, ecology, that's the place to go. So please go and patronize it at some stage after this talk. But Select and Premier occupy a special place in my heart. From the late 70s, 1979, to the late 2000s, 30 years when Shanbagh shut and Select began its inevitable decline, my life in Bangalore was defined by visits to these two stores. And my ritual was to leave home walking. I live, as some of you know, on the other side of MG Road, Brunton Road. Leave home with a jhola, proudly with a jhola. Because I was a jhola wala before that term was invented. And I would go with a jhola, turn left on, from Brunton Road onto MG Road, walk down, go to Select, pick up some books, go to Shanbagh, pick up a few more books, go to Variety, which was this wonderful news seller opposite KC Das, which had very interesting magazines, including foreign magazines. If my jhola was not too loaded, go upstairs to the British Council and borrow a few books. And with this booty, collected in 4 different places, second-hand books in Select, new books in Premier, newspapers and magazines in Variety, and library books from the BCL, I would descend to parades, take out my jhola, order a cup of coffee and look at what I had. And then I would put it all back, and since it was about 6 kilos or 8 kilos by now, I would take an auto back home. Now, of these 5 places, only parades remains. Variety is gone, British Council is gone, Premier is gone, Select is more or less gone, but parades remains. And before I turn to other bookstores in Bangalore, allow me to say a word about parades. Some years ago, I was viciously attacked by a young left-wing scholar. This may surprise some of you that I'm actually sometimes attacked by left-wing scholars too. And among the things this gentleman said, or this whatever radical said, he wouldn't want like to be called a gentleman, I beg your pardon. He said, you know, I was being proposed as a mediator in the civil conflict in Chhattisgarh between Naxalites and the Indian state. So someone had proposed my name, and he said, you can't trust this fellow. He's a man of the establishment. He is patronized by the American establishment and the Indian establishment. Now, I normally do not reply to ad hominem criticisms. But this called for an answer, that I'm simultaneously a member of the American establishment and the Indian establishment. So I wrote a brief reply to this website where this debate was being conducted about the civil war in Chhattisgarh, saying, the only establishment I am a member of is Koshi's Parades Cafe in Bangalore. All right. So I'm glad Parades is here, though Premier Select. Premier is gone, Select is more or less gone. PCL is shut down. Also has Variety News. But there are replacements for Premier and Select at hand. And these are the current booksellers of Bangalore with whom I am going to end my talk. Now, Cantonment, English-speaking, English-reading Cantonment has some wonderful bookstores. There is Champaka, run by Radhika Timbadia and her team, of Edwards Road, with a nice cafe to go along with. There is Gube, run by Ravi at the end of Church Street, another charming and wonderful stores. And without taking anything away from Gube and Champaka, as a historian who really relies on obscure, out-of-print books, the two stores that have meant much more to me are Blossom and Bukhwa. And when I think of my relationship with Blossom and Bukhwa, I'm reminded of my days in Delhi, or what my relationship was between Select and Premier. The Select and Premier is slightly different because one was new, one was old. You know, all of you, those of you who know Delhi would know Bengali market, right? And in Bengali market, there are two legendary sweet and snack shops, the kind of parades. In Bangalore, we have only one parades. But in Bangalore market, you have Nathu sweets and Bengali sweets. And it's like India and Pakistan. There's a Wagah border in between. And the loyalties are intense. Absolutely intense and passionate. So when I was a student in Delhi, the group I hung around with would only go to Bengali sweets. When I got a little older, a person I much admired, the philosopher Ramchandra Gandhi, would only go to Nathu sweets. So I first entered Nathu sweets about 15 years after I entered Bengali sweets because I wanted to meet Ramu Gandhi. And I'm glad I did, because Ramu Gandhi, who had by that time taught in Delhi, Shantiniketan, Rajasthan, Oxford and California and a few other places, used to describe himself as holding the chair of philosophy at Nathu Sweets. And I have ever since described myself as holding the chair of history at Kochi's Parades Cafe. So, if you lived in Delhi and you liked Bengali sweets and snacks, you would go either to Nathu Sweets or to Bengali Sweets. You just couldn't live in polite society unless you had taken sides. You know, it was like East Bengal and Mohun Bagan, I suppose, in Kolkata. But happily, this being Bangalore, the spirit of Bangalore allowed you to patronize both Select and Premier, and today to patronize both Bookworm and Blossom. There's no problem, right? And the lack of a decent library in our city has been compensated for by many people, not just me, by Blossom and Bookworm. And I think these two and other stores like that are among the reasons that actually now Bangalore probably has the largest and the most intelligent English book buying culture in our country. And I have made many findings. I've had many rich and varied findings at both these stores. You know, at Bookworm, for example, signed copies from V.P. Menon's collection. You know, the great secretary to Sardar Patel who integrated the Indian states. One of the books I most treasure was kept for me by Krishna of Bookworm, who's here, which was Monica Felton's biography of Rajaji, I Meet Rajaji, signed by V.P. Menon. Now, I had a copy, but I wanted a signed copy too. Likewise with Blossom, where I made a kind of even more amazing find, which I shall tell you about. One day I got a call from Mahi Gowda saying, "Sir, do you have the 8 volumes of D.G. Tendulkar's biography of Mahatma Gandhi?" I said, "Yes, of course, Mahi Gowda. Of course I have it." He said, "No, sir, I meant, do you have the first edition of these 8 volumes? I said, "What do you think? I'm a Gandhi biographer. Of course I have them." He said, "Sir, do you have the signed 8 editions, each signed by D.G. Tendulkar of Mahatma Gandhi?" I said, "No." He said, "Please come here, sir. Otherwise they'll go in half an hour." So I went there, and here were these 8. I mean, this is it's a collector's item. This is D.G. Tendulkar, who, by the way, Anjum figures in My Son's Father. He was an early hero of Dom Moresque. Wrote a biography of Gandhi in the early 50s, which is detailed chronological account of Gandhi, encouraged by Nehru, with a foreword by Nehru, beautifully bound and with kind of handmade paper, and with photographs collected for it by Vittal Bhai Javeri, who was close to Gandhi and helped with Devdas Gandhi, did a famous documentary film on Gandhi. So here was Mahi Gowda sitting with 8 volumes, all 8 volumes of D.G. Tendulkar's Gandhi, each volume signed by D.G. Tendulkar and Vittal Bhai Javeri. So when I went there, He said, I have these, and he said, bring your 8 volumes, and we'll do a swap. And he named a very reasonable price, which I shall not tell you because it may be my special price. And so we swapped them, and I took these 8 and I put them in my bag. By that time I had a car, so I put them in my car, shall we say. And he said, sir, wait a minute. And I left my 8 volumes, first editions there. He said, sir, wait a minute. You sign your 8. So someone will think they have got your copies. All right. Now, that is my Blossom story. And of course, I've told you one bookworm story, one other, which tells you a kind of story about how scrupulous and well-informed and historically minded these booksellers are. I got a call from Krishna Gowda saying, sir, I have the whole run of Mark magazine from 1946 to 2010. And he said, very politely, because he's a polite man, he said, sir, do you know anyone who will buy them? He didn't say, sir, I know you have no interest in art, so do you know anyone who will buy them? So very, very politely said, sir, do you know anyone? But I want to set the whole set, sir. This can't go piecemeal. It is. So I rang up Ashoka University and I said, this is what you have. And then they spoke to Krishna Gowda on the phone. And after hearing his kind of shy, reticent manner and his Kannadiga accent, they wanted to half the price. So I called them and scolded them. I said, you won't get it for love or money anywhere. This is what it is on 8 books, not available. So that's now in the Ashoka Library. For those of you who are interested in art history, Krishna Gowda's collection of Mark magazine from 1946 till 2010. Now, happily, though Premier and Select have gone, happily, Gube, Champaka, Bookworm and Blossom are still here. The owners are all decades younger than me. So I hope to be patronizing them till the end of my days. But let me end with one story. Again, since I'm a historian, I don't make things up. My dreams are made up, but not my actual anecdotes. I got a call from Krishna saying, sir, we are releasing G.R. Vishwanath's book in our store. And G.R. Vishwanath is coming. G.R. Vishwanath was the first test cricketer whose hands I shook. My uncle Dore is sitting here. And this meeting happened as follows. Dore owned a Fiat, having just got a promotion, as I told you. And we were driving down Nupatunga Road. And as we were driving on Dore's Fiat, he spied a small little man hunched on a Vespa. And he said, Vishy, Vishy, Vishy. And he made him stop. Vishy, a test cricketer, having just got a debut 100 on a Vespa. And he said, shake hands with my nephew. So I have adored G.R. Vishwanath ever since. There are many other reasons to adore him. He was a wonderful batsman. He's an extraordinarily decent human being. He is truly the milk of human kindness resides all over him and inside him. So Krishna called me and said, sir, G.R. Vishwanath is coming. And I don't know. Now he said, I know that after your BCCI experience, you don't like cricket anymore, sir. But G.R. Vishwanath is coming, sir. So I said, of course, I'll go. So I said, what time is your talk? And he said 6:30. So I said, let me go a little early. And he had just changed his store, from one part of Church Street to another. I said, let me go a little early and go to Blossom and kind of just browse there because I'm going to go to Bookworm anyway. So I was browsing in the old Blossom, that is the one behind Shingar Shopping Center. And I realized I had to reach 10 or 15 minutes early because I wanted a selfie with G.R. Vishwanath. The few selfies I would like to take is one with G.R. Vishwanath. So I came out, I'm an old man, I'm in my 60s. I don't have good eyesight. Bangalore has extraordinarily transformed, Church Street is not the Church Street down which I would walk with a jola from Select to Premier and then to Variety. And I was utterly confused. I said, where the hell is Bookworm? Is it on the left? Is it on the right? I walked right, I couldn't find, and I was like, 3 minutes left. And then suddenly I saw Mahi Gowda. I said, Mahi, where is Bookworm? And he took me there and showed me the store. Now that is the spirit of Bangalore. Thank you.